Hey, it's Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and it's Thursday, it's September 9th. This will be our chart lesson for today. And I thought I would start off by showing you the daily chart with our envelope indicator on here. You can see we've been really turning down around the purple line on the upper side, and then turning up mostly off either the midline or the green line recently on this really since May as we started this new rally. Um, we are right at the midline. It looked like we bounced off of it yesterday, but it's turned down because we went a little lower today. So maybe we weren't quite ready to bounce. Let me back out here or zoom in, I guess I should say here, and show this a little better. I wanted to show you all these targets I've had. The original one I had was the blue target to here, and that's a near term. The better one's probably the red to the red. But you can see we met that blue and we could not get through there. We just started kind of working sideways here once we reached that blue measured move. And that's basically almost a perfect, for a daily chart, I'd call that a perfect measured move. And we just kind of got stuck in this little yellow channel here, and we failed out the high side, then failed out the low side. And it looked like we were going to go higher today. What started off as a really strong day, we opened here and we're trading all the way up here. There is a second entry short here. Notice this is a new swing low. It's lower than these lows. So you get a first entry. And the second entry was here. It's not really a good trigger bar. And it looked like it was going to be a failure. And it still could be a failure because we could turn back up off this midline. But at this point, it looks like a second entry short followed by a lower high. Again, we were kind of stuck in this, so it doesn't surprise me that we bounced there momentarily before we pushed through. And so it looks like we may be headed back to possibly test these lows here. Again, we do have the midline right here, which has been strong at times. When we have gotten through it, we've bounced off the green most of the time. So we'll see where we go from tomorrow. But this was a really odd day because we started off so strong to the upside and it just petered out, and then it was so strong to the downside. So really an interesting day to start off that strong and end that bearish. I mean, that is a very bearish reversal bar, so I wouldn't be surprised if we don't go lower. Again, we have bounced off this midline a few times, and you can see that was about the low point, and we've bounced some off of those lows before the day was over. So we'll just have to kind of see where prices go from here. Um, it's going to be interesting. Let me get to the other chart. Okay, here we are. We're back to the intraday chart, the 2000 tick chart, and you can see we had this spike and channel up, and we traded higher. We had a little break here, a move to a new high, no two legs or anything, just a move to a new high, and then it was off to the races down again. Very similar to the reversal we had yesterday. Uh, we didn't quite have as strong a trend up, but we just kind of same thing happened yesterday, and it happened around, looks like right around 9 o'clock, just after 9 o'clock. And same thing today, the selling came in just after 9 o'clock. So somebody's dumping a lot of shares or a lot of contracts, and it looks to be right around the same time period as it was yesterday. So there could be some large institutional trader that's unwinding some trades or something. Doesn't really matter. The price action still played out, although you don't usually see this strong a trend reverse that strongly that quickly. I almost want to call this a range day, but to sell off that strongly, I really don't think this is a range day. Generally, you will be within your overnight highs and lows, and we were well outside that overnight high. I would say this was probably the middle of your pattern. I haven't put the measuring on it, but it looks like we moved up and had a two-legged correction. And so I would call that the middle of the pattern. And you can see we didn't get anywhere near that. And that would have been another clue that, hey, we may be selling off here. So just something to think about. Generally, if you don't meet a target like that on a strong day like this before it's over, that means you're going to have a fairly decent move in the other direction, and we did. There is some strong support here that held. You can see there's two legs down here in the measured move. We bounced right along those lows for the most part. We pushed a little lower, and then finally late in the day we went lower. But you can see this yellow channel in the measured move. We went straight to it at the highs, and looks like we're trying to get there on the lows. We bounced real close to that. So really from about noontime on, I would, there's a slight upward move here, but this is mostly just sideways stuff. We did end up getting a couple of legs up before it was over. You'd want to measure those as well. You can see that's about where we turned. We did push up that one more time. We made a measured move up basically based on the channel rather than the two legs. So that's was the channel was the more, or the range was the more accurate than the actual trend, the two legs or whatever. So anyway, let's zoom in here. We'll go through these trades. There's a few of them today. It was mostly upward until, like I said, just after 9 o'clock, and then it was all bearish after that. I don't see any reason to be buying anything in here. I don't see anything I like buying. Just stay with the shorts when it's this, because every little rally met selling strongly. And that's pretty much what happened yesterday too. If you look back at yesterday, it looks much more sideways yesterday, but there's definitely a downward bias here. And we did try to creep back up, but this was a range day here for sure. Where today, even though we had some strong support, I wouldn't really call this a range day. I'd call this just a reversal day. We traded up and reversed and traded back down. So let me back out here a little more, zoom in a little more here, and we'll go through these trades and we'll wrap up the week. Today's Thursday, no chart lessons on Friday, so this will wrap it up for us. 7 o'clock came just as we're coming down off this high right here, and so the first trade I saw was this trade. It's a little congestive. It's at the EMA. It's not at the trend line. It's kind of in no man's land, even though the EMA has been holding a few times here. Even there, we just barely pushed through it. But notice you get you got a new low here, and you get a first entry and then a second entry. And so you get a little bit of a trap there. You may take that trade. It's a little bit aggressive just because of where it happens at, and it's a little bit sideways. Although I don't see, that looks a little, it's got a little bit of stem on it, but you don't see the no body bar. That has a real small body, but all those bars are real small. So I don't know if that necessarily, it's enough sideways action there that it should concern you though. And that's the reason I marked it green. If that was a nice bullish bar, I'd probably say, or even just a full bar, I might have made that blue. But just because of where it's located, not at the midline, not at the key entry point, trend line. So even though the EMA is a key entry point, it's a minor one. And you want to see prices bouncing off of it consistently, which you might argue that we did bounce off of it a few times. So, and it worked this time too. So it looked like it was going to do the same here, and it would have failed. Although you would have got a scalp out of that anyway. So there's a, this is just so congestive. I didn't like this, but there is a second, I think it triggers a first entry. Maybe it doesn't. Looks like each one of those highs. So that's not a second entry, but it's a tiny bar off of support. I mean, there's only 3 ticks there. That was real tempting to want to go long there, but you're not even back to the EMA there, but you do have this support. But when it dropped lower and gave you either one of these bars, it does look a little congested, but that's just because there's some negative pressure here and they can't get it through that key entry point. And if you understand that, you can see once it broke higher, it took off. So it turned, that's probably the trade of the morning so far, or it is the trade of the morning so far. It was the trade of the day until we turned down, to be honest. That was a nice move, and you would have probably got a runner out of that. I don't know if I would have ridden out a runner through all of this, but there's still a nice move there. And then we're just kind of bouncing sideways, but you can see we try to go lower once, twice, 3 times, 4 times. really you made that low and you get the double test of it. Plus it bounces right off the EMA and the support, a nice bullish bar. I like going long there just to try to ride it back to the highs and maybe it keeps going, but it does turn down and then you get a first entry, second entry, but normally I'd say that bar is not bullish enough to go long on a second entry, but you got a new low there and you get a first entry, second entry, and so it's a failed second entry short that makes a higher point. So when it breaks higher there, you got plenty of room back to this high, and maybe it'll keep going, and this time it does. It keeps going. So another great entry, and you get another runner right there. And then we come back and you get a first entry, and there's a second entry right there. If you went long right there, you probably got stopped out. As you can see, there's a spike and channel down, but more than that, it's just going sideways, and you can see those all that congestion right there. And so it's hard. And originally I had this like this, and so there's not much room back there. When we made another high, I kind of adjusted it, but I still think this was really the way you probably should have played this channel here if you were playing the channel. Make it yellow where it's easier to see, but you can clearly see we were in that. We had a failed breakout, and then we were right back in it. And so if you went long there, you got stopped out just before it goes higher. So only real warning is that we're in that little tight trading range. And the other thing is all that congestion right there. Those are you definitely have the no body. You're just kind of going sideways. You're not getting rejection out of there. You already touched the trend line here. You touched it here, and it didn't make a new high. And so you could have got burned on that one by a single tick. And if you did, that's your only real warning is that notice too that we couldn't get back to the upper side. Even though we got over and off the midline here, we couldn't get up there. So we're losing momentum here, just like we did. This is almost very identical to what happened yesterday. So hopefully those of you that got burned on this yesterday didn't fall for it again today. We run up here. Then you get a first entry, and then you're back in here, and you get a second entry that fails. And I like going short there on the trap. It does come back into the range, and you would have scalped out of that already, but it does come back and give you a lower high. But because we're back in the range, I'm a little leery of it entering again. I would say you probably could enter. It's just the first entry is the problem. I would have waited on. I saw that and liked it, but I thought better wait on a second entry because we should have dropped on down. The trap worked, but that's all you could get out of that. And it just didn't take off. We're still kind of, if you put your measured moves on here, you can see we just came off that measured move there. And then we're kind of bouncing on it again. It's just hard to believe we'd go back down again. A lot of times on these failures, I really thought we'd try to push higher again, was my thinking. But we continue to go lower, and I just don't see any other entries here. That's too congestive, just sideways. Just a first entry. You don't really get a lower high here. You could actually draw a trend line off of this and let that play out. So if you saw this trend line, when we came back through here and tested that EMA, the only problem is you got to go short right at the lows, and now you got congestion there too. So I just don't think any of those are worth entering. Then you finally make a new low, first entry, and there's a second entry right there, but we're not back to the trend line, not back to the EMA. It's the first close outside that little short-term channel, and then we push higher. But by the time that's set up, that's a really bearish bar. It's just so congestive right there. And the reason being is there's a lot of buying coming in, but the selling pressure is still there. So if you recognize that, you may take that trade, but I'll be honest with you, I didn't take that trade. I didn't like it. You could probably argue for it to at least be green because this thing has been fairly bearish. But you're taking a chance here that we may get this break outside here, which we do. But by the time we do, you get a second. You get this. Basically, I looked at this as a lower high and fairly decent bar. And you can see it's a lower high. And now it looks like 2 legs back too, even though it's not technically by the count a second entry because you make a new low, it's still 2 legs back. So I like that one. And then we just start chopping sideways here. And you might have looked at this as a failure, a failed second entry long. It doesn't really set up that well for, and you already had your close outside and at least one strong leg down. You might, a lot of times you'll get 2. But it just doesn't, there's a couple of 3 ticks there before it's low, and you see it looks like it's going to fail. It does drop on down, but I think you're better off to wait till here till you get a second entry short, and you still got plenty of room back to these lows, and you also have a double top here. So that's your better entry, and even then it's aggressive because there's a little bit of congestion there. It drops on down. You definitely don't want to be buying yet, and you get a first entry. And you technically get a second entry right here, and so you might have got burned again on this one before it went higher. And I only like this one because it's a failed second entry long. But the fact that we pushed out and then we got back above here, there's too big a chance we're going higher. Although there's no reason to go long yet, especially with all that sideways stuff. I'd be more apt to go short right there than long. And if you did go short there, you're just a little bit too early. And the only reason I like this one is because it's a failed second entry long, and you would expect after this failed breakout for prices to push lower, back into the channel, or the range, I should say, not the channel. Although it does make a channel. This turns out to be a really nice trade. They trapped a bunch of longs up here, and then people realize, hey, the selling's not over with yet. There's another 2 legs back here. Again, it's kind of a repeat pattern of this. It's technically not, or this one right here, it's technically not a second entry because of the new low. But by the time you get this big bar, you don't want to go short right there. Yeah, it works, but that's not a good setup. And then you just come down into this. I don't see any reason to go short here. Too congestive. And it comes back in the same thing, just too congestive until maybe you get this lower high. You don't get a lower high here. As you see, that made the high, and your lower high is here, and you don't want to go short there into the lows. And so finally, you get this first entry and then a second entry, and you get a nice bearish bar on a lower high. So that was a better place to go short. It's still a little aggressive too because of all that congestion. And I don't think you want to buy. Then you run up first entry, and there's a second entry short right there. And this is starting to look like we may be going to climb out of here, and there's a measured move that's way up here. So I don't like that. Wait on the lower high, which comes here. There's still room back to these highs to get out. Didn't matter. Then you get a second entry short right here, back into the channel. It works. Just you got a couple extra ticks to play with, but it bounces again, and that's why these others are. That's why I'm saying I'm real hesitant to go short on most of these until you get a lower high or a second entry or something. And technically here you're not that interested in the second entry, but you got a new high, so it's a first entry, second entry, so it's a failed second entry long and a second entry short. So you probably trap some longs here. And you see it runs down, but then the buying comes back in, it goes higher. And I only like this one because it is a second entry, and it is a measured move and a big bearish bar, and a long way away from the EMA. So it's time for prices to come back. And even then, it's still aggressive because you're better off to wait on the lower high. You just don't get one here. It's way down here, right into the lows again. And I don't see anything down here you want to take either. So, because now you've got to close outside, you make two legs, so you could bounce out of there. But that takes us into 3 o'clock. And lately, after 3 o'clock, there's been nothing. So I think I talked about it yesterday. I would probably consider Not taking any new trades after 2:30. I think that needs to be the cutoff time. I think I'm going to move this gray line to 2:30 and let that be our cutoff time, because anything after 2:30, uh, you may not get enough movement. Because once you get into 3 o'clock, I mean, this is probably a lot of movement for after 3 o'clock compared to what we usually get. I mean, look what we had yesterday, 3 or 4 bars, nothing. The day before, same thing, 3 or 4 bars, nothing. Here you didn't get anything. There's 3 or 4 bars just straight beside each other. Nothing much there. Got a little movement right there. Not much here. Nothing there. You just don't want to get caught in that 3 o'clock. You can see nothing really there. So if you take a trade after 2:30, you're taking a risk that you're going to get stuck in that trade and can't get out before closing time because there's not enough movement. The market basically everybody quits trading at 3 o'clock. I think it's so ingrained in people to be out by 3 that people just stop trading at 3. So I would be out by then. But yeah, this is just kind of an up-down day. We closed yesterday. We actually closed down from yesterday 20 points or so. So that's that's a significant close down. We basically started back to the lows of the overnight. We've been finding support here. We finally worked through in the after hours. So we'll see. Let's just look back across here. You can see the line there. I mean, you got to go all the way back to in August. We were finding resistance there, and we'll see if it acts as support this time and we move forward. But there's been some really strong selling, as I've talked about, right around 9 o'clock the last couple of days. So we'll see if that happens again tomorrow. But I'm well over 20 minutes here, so I'm going to wrap it up. Yeah, just be careful. Once you get this far away from the EMA like this, just be careful selling this stuff. And when you start going sideways like this, be real careful, because you can get chopped up. I mean, we've seen a few of these. There's been some what look like decent second entries that fell on you. So pay attention to the big picture and what's going on, and be careful on some of those traps when you get late into the trend. So anyway, I'm going to wrap it up. Hope you had a good week. We'll be back again to do it Monday. I'm done for today. This is Mac with PriceActionTradingSystem.com, and we'll see you next time.